The cold night wrapped around Frosthaven, and the city seemed suffocated in the crowd of shadows. Rohan sat in his chamber, hearing only the crackle of the fire in the hearth. His hands still trembled from the power of the crystal, and the dark glint within it seemed alive. He knew the council's judgment awaited him tonight, and yet he could hear Kellor's laughter curling through his mind, an invisible serpent coiling in his thoughts. Then a voice whispered in his head, "They fear you, Wolf." And rightly so. As long as you follow me, you are a force they have never seen. Nun Rohan rose and approached the window, staring down at the city's flickering lights. The people feared him, and in their eyes he saw not respect, but pure dread. He still could not discern where he ended, and the darkness began. NNTHE door opened quietly, and Aelin stepped in. She was composed, but her eyes glimmered with concern. "Rohan, you must show them that you are still a man. Today is your trial. Remember what the elder told you?" "And I remember," he muttered, averting his gaze from the crystal. "Fire forgives or it burns. But what if it doesn't burn me? What if the curse is already too deep?" Aelin stepped closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You fight not just your fear, Rohan. You fight for the people who still love you, even if they don't understand it." NHER words offered no comfort. Rohan knew that during the trial, every gaze, every whisper would hunt his smallest mistake, every subtle sign of weakness. And yet he had to go. Climbing the steps to the great hall, he felt the crystal beneath his clothing grow hot, pulsing like the heart of some foreign creature. Hundreds of eyes watched from the shadows of the hall. Lords, advisors, soldiers. All of them waited for him to fail. NNTHE elder stood at the center of a stone circle, a fire calmly licking the air before him. "Rohan," he said, "step into the flame and let the truth speak for itself." Rohan stepped forward. The crystal on his chest began to burn more fiercely, and he felt a surge of the power that had once changed the tide of battle. Cold and fire merged inside him, and for a fleeting moment, he saw Kellor's face in the flames. NNTHE fire did not throw him back, nor did it become a friend. It burned with neutrality, watching. Rohan felt the crystal whisper stronger, "Do not let them decide your fate. Do not let them take my power." And then he understood. The trial by fire would be not merely a judgment for him, it would be a battle between himself and the crystal. "I will not let you control me," he said, and stepped fully into the blaze. NNTHE flames wrapped his hands, but the pain was not what he expected. As if the fire tested him, whispering, "Are you real, or deceiving yourself?" Rohan drew a deep breath, feeling his own will rise to meet the darkness dwelling within the crystal. NNTHE fire burned, yet he did not cry out. His eyes met the elder's gaze, unflinching. And in that instant, Rohan realized the true trial was not in the flames, it was in resisting the darkness inside him. When he stepped out of the circle, the hall was silent, breathless. The fire had not destroyed him, but then from the shadows came a quiet, cunning laugh. "Well done, Wolf, but for how long?" Every presence in the room felt it. Something had changed. Rohan had walked through the trial by fire, yet he had not passed untouched. The council chamber remained silent long after Rohan had stepped from the fire's embrace. Lords and ladies exchanged uneasy glances, their faces masks of loyalty and doubt. Even the elder's white beard trembled as he considered what he had just witnessed. No man had walked through the trial by fire unscathed in centuries, and yet here Rohan stood, his flesh untouched, his eyes alight with a cold determination that unsettled even the bravest of knights. Nellen was at his side, her hand tight upon his arm. "You've done it," she whispered. Yet even as she spoke, a shadow of doubt flickered across her face. She could see it, just as he could. The crystal beneath his tunic, thrumming with its own heartbeat, waiting, hungering. Murmur ran through the council chamber. Lord Dareth broke it first. "This is unnatural," he spat, his hands trembling as he pointed at Rohan. "No man should endure fire, and not be marked. You have passed, yes, but at what cost? The blood of Frosthaven will cry against us if we allow such power to remain unchecked." Lady Eris rose, her cloak brushing the stone floor. "It is a curse," she hissed, voice cutting like a knife. "Do you hear me? A curse!" We cannot trust him with such sorcery." Rohan's jaw tightened. "It is not sorcery I wield. It is the will to protect my people." His voice was steady, yet beneath it burned the edge of his fear. He had survived the fire, but the crystal had not yielded. It had whispered, reminding him of Kalor's laughter, reminding him that the darkness was patient, waiting for the moment he faltered. The elder raised a hand, demanding silence. "Enough." His voice carried the weight of age and authority. "Rohan has survived the trial by fire. That is truth. But truth alone cannot banish fear from the hearts of men. You would do well to remember this." Rohan nodded slightly, yet inside he felt the first prickle of unease. Even survival could not erase what the council had already begun to whisper. Whispers had a way of becoming roars. Later, as the council dispersed, Rohan walked the corridors of Frosthaven in near solitude. Snow pressed against the keep's outer walls, and the wind cut through the stone like knives. His reflection in a window was not his own, eyes glinting, face shadowed, haunted by a presence that was no longer merely within the crystal, but within him. Nellen appeared silently, stepping close. "The people fear you," she said, her voice low. "Even the soldiers. You must decide, Rohan. Do you embrace what the crystal offers, or do you fight it?" Could not answer. The question had no simple resolution. Every time he drew on the crystal's power, he remembered the battlefield, how the frost had leapt from his sword, how the raiders had fallen like shattered ice. He had saved lives, yes, but he had also felt Kalor's hand in the act, a puppet master guiding him through carnage. On case if the crystal sensed his doubt, it pulsed against his chest. Cold spread outward, tingling through his bones. For a moment he could hear the distant wailing of the raiders, souls frozen mid-struggle, and Kalor's voice whispering closer now. "You cannot escape me, Wolf. I am the frost in your veins." Nellen gripped his hand, her fingers warm against his cold. "We will find a way," she said. Yet Rohan knew the words were fragile. The darkness within him was patient, and Kalor's laughter echoed even as the wind rattled the keep's walls. In the courtyard below, torches flickered. Soldiers moved in uneasy formations, whispering among themselves. Fear had a language all its own, and Rohan could hear it now. Suspicion, doubt, awe, and dread mingled in a single quiet pulse that reached his ears even within the stone halls. Clenched his fists, feeling the crystal's heartbeat sync with his own. The power within him had passed the fire, but the trial of Frosthaven was far from over. Every glance, every whispered word, every shadow could become a weapon against him. And in the shadows, Kalor's presence waited, patient, cunning, a wolf stalking its prey. Rohan's gaze lifted to the sky, snow falling in silent sheets. Somewhere beyond the mountains the world was watching, and he would need every ounce of will to face what came next. And then the distant sound of hooves on snow reached him, low and steady, an approaching force, neither friend nor foe, carrying a message that would shatter the fragile peace of Frosthaven. The hoofbeats echoed across the frozen courtyard long before the riders appeared. Snow swirled in furious eddies, whipped by the bitter wind, and carried the scent of steel and smoke. Rohan's breath came in ragged puffs, each exhale a visible testament to the cold that had seeped into his bones. The crystal beneath his tunic thrummed against his chest, pulsing in quiet warning. From the storm of snow emerged a lone rider atop a black stallion, the banners of Frosthaven streaming behind him, though ragged and torn. He dismounted with practiced ease, his boots crunching against ice as he approached the gates. His face was hidden beneath a fur-lined hood, but the air around him carried the authority of one who had walked through battle and emerged unbroken. "Lord Rohan," the rider called, voice carrying over the wind. "Forgive the intrusion, but the eastern pass has been breached. Raiders, not like the others. These are worse." Rohan's fingers tightened around the hilt of his sword, the metal warm beneath his touch. The memory of the frost, the crystal's hunger, surged in his mind. He had survived fire, he had mastered steel, but the frost, Kalor's darkness, still pulsed in secret, waiting for the perfect moment. "Worse than before?" Rohan asked, his voice low, almost a growl. Aelin's hand rested briefly on his arm, a grounding presence amid the chaos. NTHE Rider nodded. They carry banners of shadow, strange sigils carved into their shields. They move as one, yet strike like vipers. Half the villages along the pass have already fallen, and Rohan felt the first stirrings of fear, not for himself, but for the people he had sworn to protect. Every instinct screamed at him to ride east immediately, to lead the company into battle, but the crystal pulsed against his chest, slow and deliberate. Kalor's laughter echoed faintly in the edges of his mind, teasing him, daring him to rely on power that was no longer fully his. "We cannot delay," he said finally. "Call the captains. We march at first light." His words were sharp, decisive, but beneath them lay the tremor of uncertainty, and Aelin's gaze lingered on his face. "Rohan, you must be careful. You've already felt the crystal's will. Don't let it take the first swing of your sword without thought." Rohan's jaw tightened. "I have no choice. The people need me. I will not stand idle while they burn." Night fell quickly, faster than usual under the storm clouds rolling over the mountains. Torches flickered along the keep's walls, casting long, wavering shadows. Soldiers whispered among themselves, their breath misting in the icy air, while scouts returned with reports of tracks, broken fences, and the eerie absence of life. In the council chamber, Rohan gathered his most trusted lieutenants. Maps were spread across the table, candlelight dancing across inked lines and symbols. "We will not fight blindly," he said, pointing to the winding pass. "We will draw them into the valley, where the river cuts through the cliffs. There, we set our trap." Aelin stood behind him, silent but vigilant. Even now, Rohan could feel the crystal pressing close to his heart, its pulse, a subtle, insistent rhythm that echoed Kalor's mocking whispers. Hours passed in preparation. Rohan walked the ramparts alone, staring into the darkness. Snow fell in heavy drifts, blanketing the keep in cold silence, and in that silence he heard it. A faint whisper, more distinct than before, threading through his thoughts. "They will come, Wolf, and when they do, you will decide whether I feast or you do." NTHE warning was not unwelcome, yet it chilled him to the core. He knew the crystal would demand blood, sooner or later. The frost had already tasted it once, and it would not forget. At the eastern gate, a lone scout returned, breathless and wide-eyed. "Lord Rohan, it's worse than we thought. They're not just raiders. They carry banners, black banners, and masks. Faces hidden, and they move like shadows." Rohan's grip tightened on the map, crumpling its corner. He could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on him, the lives of soldiers, villagers, and the innocent. Outside, the storm whipped the snow into wild patterns, as if the wind itself was warning him of the coming night. NNHE turned to Aelin, his voice low but firm. "The trap is ready, but when they arrive, I will not be alone in this. The frost will rise if it must, and if it does, we must be prepared for what it becomes." NNTHE candle flickered. Shadows stretched, and somewhere in the swirling snow beyond the walls, the first signs of the black banners appeared. A dark tide creeping toward Frosthaven. The storm had not relented. Snow pelted the outer walls of Frosthaven like shards of glass, and the wind's howl seemed to carry voices, mocking, distant, and insistent. Rohan paced the battlements, eyes scanning the shifting whiteness beyond the keep. Somewhere out there, the black banners moved, a living shadow creeping through the snow. "Lord Rohan." Aelin's voice was soft but firm, breaking through the roaring wind. "The soldiers are ready, but there is something I feel. Something in the frost. It's restless." Rohan didn't answer immediately. He could feel it too, a tremor beneath the stone, a faint hum from the crystal over his heart. It was no longer merely a warning, it was anticipation. Kalor's presence, subtle yet undeniably powerful, wound around his thoughts like smoke. He swallowed, tasting iron and icin. "They'll come tonight," Rohan said finally, his voice almost a growl. "We've planned for this. Every trap, every flank, they will meet it." His gaze swept the ramparts, meeting the eyes of the soldiers. "We do not flee. We do not surrender. Frosthaven holds." NNTHE night deepened. Lanterns flickered against stone, casting long, grotesque shadows that danced across walls slick with frost. Inside the keep, the council room buzzed with quiet tension. Maps littered the table. Candles guttered in the draft, and Rohan's lieutenants whispered in urgent tones, double-checking every strategy, every signal. And a distant horn sounded, low, guttural, and warped by the wind. Rohan froze. Even the soldiers stiffened, hands on hilt or bow. The echo rolled across the valley, mingling with the storm, and then silence. The pause was brief, yet heavy with the promise of blood. "Here they come," muttered Lieutenant Harvin, eyes narrowing. "Gods help us. They move faster than any raider should." Rohan nodded, gripping the parapet. "Keep your men steady. Wait for my signal. And trust your instincts, more than your orders. Tonight, we survive by cunning as much as by steel." Then movement appeared in the snow, a ripple, almost imperceptible at first. But soon, the black banners were visible. Dozens, then hundreds, emerging from the blizzard like a tide of shadows. Figures cloaked in darkness, their faces hidden behind masks, marching with deadly synchronicity. They did not falter, did not hesitate, their silence louder than any shout. NNTHE, first volley of arrows met them, sparking against shields and armor, yet they advanced undeterred. Rohan's pulse quickened. The trap, the valley, the cliffs, was still ahead, but now the enemy was at Frosthaven's gates. He felt the crystal pulse, insistent, demanding, urging him forward. Its glow beneath his tunic flared briefly, a warning, or perhaps a threat. Naelin stepped close, her hand brushing his arm. "You must not let it control you," she whispered. "Not tonight, not ever." Rohan swallowed the taste of fear. "I am its master," he said aloud, though even he wasn't certain. "And tonight, I will show it who rules." NNTHE first clash rang out. Steel against steel, the cry of men and the shriek of the wind blending into a chaotic symphony. Frosthaven's outer gate shuddered under repeated strikes. Shadows moved like smoke, slipping around defenses, testing weaknesses. And somewhere beneath it all, Rohan felt the frost stir, dark and hungry, probing for an opening. "And hold the line," he shouted, drawing his sword. Its edge gleamed even in the dim torchlight, a promise of blood and defiance. NNTHE snow turned red. The clash intensified. Soldiers screamed. And through it all, the crystal's pulse grew stronger, faster, sharper, like a heartbeat of pure ice. Rohan's mind raced, every thought a struggle between control and surrender. Kaelor's whisper was louder now. "They are yours to slaughter or to watch die. Choose, wolf, choose." A sudden movement caught his eye. Beyond the first wave of attackers, one figure broke from the black tide, moving with unnerving speed and purpose. Its mask glinted under the torchlight. Rohan's stomach tightened. He knew this shape. He knew the intent. And he realized, with a sudden jolt of dread, that this was not just a battle. It was a beginning. NNTHE masked figure raised a hand, and the storm itself seemed to respond. Snow whipped faster. Ice formed along walls, and the first of the Frostborne, monstrous creatures of Kaelor's design, emerged from the shadows to join the attack. Rohan's eyes widened, heart-hammering. The enemy had come prepared for more than mere steel, and as the first Frostborne lunged from the darkness, he understood the truth. Tonight, Frosthaven would either burn or awaken a power he had barely begun to control. NTHE wind roared. The black banners advanced, and the crystal under his chest pulsed like a drumbeat of destiny.
The snowstorm raged like a living thing, howling through the ramparts, flinging ice like knives. Rohan's grip on his sword was almost a reflex, every muscle coiled, ready to strike. Around him, Frosthaven's defenders clashed with shadows and steel, their shouts lost in the roar of wind and snow. Yet above the chaos, he felt it. The pulse of the crystal beneath his tunic, steady, insistent, whispering promises of both power and doom. NNTHE masked figure had advanced far too quickly, moving with a fluidity that defied human speed. It circled the outer defenses, cutting down anyone in its path, leaving streaks of frost and shadow in its wake. Rohan's stomach nodded. He recognized the movement, the precision, the silent malice. Kaelor's hand was guiding it, or perhaps it had become something else entirely. "Anlin?" he shouted, scanning for her among the soldiers. She was there, fighting with a ferocity that belied her lithe frame. Her arrows flew like silver knives, striking men and shadow alike, but even she faltered when the Frostborne, hulking creatures made of ice and sinew, joined the fray. Rohan charged, every step a battle against the storm, every swing of his sword a spark of defiance. He met the first Frostborne head-on, steel biting into ice with a screech that tore through the night. The creature roared, a sound that made the stone walls tremble, and lunged again, faster, stronger than any man should be able to move. Yet Rohan held firm. His sword sang in the cold, a song of survival and fury. Behind him, the walls of Frosthaven shuddered. The defenders were being pushed back, overwhelmed not just by numbers but by the unnatural cold that crept along the battlements, chilling their hearts and slowing their movements. Some soldiers stumbled, their breaths visible in the icy air as their courage waned. Rohan knew then, this was not merely a siege. This was a test, one that Kaelor had crafted for him. The crystal pulsed harder, and for a fleeting moment he felt its power surge, urging him to strike not just at the enemy, but at the very essence of the storm. His vision blurred with frost and fire, the world narrowing to the figure before him, the masked one, whose presence was both commanding and terrifying. You cannot hold them all. Aelin's voice rang in his mind, cutting through the chaos. Not without losing yourself. I do not intend to lose, he muttered, though the words felt fragile against the gale. He could sense the masked figure's intent, a dark intelligence guiding the attack, and he realized that tonight was not only a battle of armies, but of wills. Kaelor had unleashed something ancient, something that tested the limits of his control. Enthe Frostborne surged again, and Rohan found himself surrounded. He swung, ducked, parried, a whirlwind of motion fueled by desperation and power. Each strike of his sword met ice and shadow, each blow a challenge to Kaelor's unseen hand. And yet, no matter how many creatures he felled, more took their place, climbing the walls, slithering through snowdrifts, relentless as death itself. Then the masked figure leapt onto the battlements, landing in a silence that swallowed the storm for a heartbeat. Rohan froze, heart hammering. The figure's mask reflected torchlight, but the eyes behind it burned with a cold fire, studying him with intent. You are stronger than I expected, the figure said. Voice low, melodic, carrying an edge that sliced deeper than any blade. But even the strongest wolves break beneath the frost. Rohan's pulse quickened. The crystal flared, burning against his chest like molten ice. He knew then that the final test had begun, not for Frosthaven, but for himself. He could feel Kaelor's whisper in the wind, a sibilant promise. Control me, or be consumed. Enthe Frostborne pressed closer, the defenders faltering. Aelin's arrows cut down two of the nearest monsters. But the masked figure's hand rose, and the snow twisted around it, forming spikes of ice that lunged toward her. Rohan's heart seized. He could not fail. Not now. Not with everything at stake. Nnhe drew a deep breath, and the crystal beneath his tunic pulsed violently, a heartbeat in sync with his own. Steel in hand, he stepped forward, ready to confront the masked figure, ready to face whatever Kaelor had truly become. And as the first shards of ice struck his chest, he realized the battle was no longer just for Frosthaven. It was for the soul of the wolf within him. Nnhe storm screamed. The Frostborne howled, and the masked figure moved closer, smiling beneath its frozen mask. Rohan's choice would come in the next heartbeat.
Rohan's lungs burned as he charged forward, the snowstorm tearing at his face, whipping his cloak into a frenzied dance. Every step was a defiance against the impossible cold, every heartbeat a drum of war in the night. The masked figure stood on the battlements, unmoving, as though daring him to approach. Yet there was no hesitation in Rohan's stride, only resolve, sharpened by the crystal's pulse beneath his tunic. Nthe Frostborne closed in around him, grotesque shapes of ice and sinew, their claws scraping stone and frost. He swung his sword in arcs that cut through the monsters like sunlight through mist, but for every one he felled, another replaced it. The storm amplified the creatures, twisting the snow into whips and spikes, dragging the defenders into despair. Nanilin's voice cut through the chaos, urging him forward. "Rohan! Don't let him control the night. Focus!" Nanichi did. He focused on the masked figure, on the burning intelligence behind the frozen mask, on the inevitability of their collision. The crystal pulsed violently now, thrumming in rhythm with the Frostborne's assault. Rohan realized, with a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold, that the masked figure was not only guiding the creatures but drawing power from the storm itself, perhaps even from him. Steel met ice again and again, sparks flying in impossible arcs. Rohan parried, dodged, struck, his movements becoming a blur, fueled by desperation and raw will. The Frostborne faltered when confronted by his skill, but the masked figure merely watched, amused, calculating. "You fight well, wolf," the figure intoned, voice like shards of glass. But even wolves bleed under frost. Rohan's grip tightened on his sword. "I am no wolf to be hunted," he replied through gritted teeth. "I am the storm that devours your frost." The figure tilted its head, and in that movement, Rohan caught a flicker of recognition, the cadence of a familiar stride. A memory buried deep. Could it be? No, it could not. Kalor would not reveal himself so openly. Or had the mage's corruption been complete, erasing the man beneath? The battlements shuddered as a massive Frostborne lunged from the side. Rohan swung, and the blade met sinew and ice with a scream of resistance. He stumbled, and the creature pressed closer, its claws slicing through the stone floor, sending shards into the wind. Naelin fired her bow with uncanny precision, each arrow a silver thread in the storm. One pierced the Frostborne's chest, another found the throat of a smaller one, but more were coming, and the masked figure's hand lifted, drawing the snow into a whirlpool of frozen fury. Rohan felt the crystal burning against his chest. The pulse was stronger than ever, synchronizing with the storm, with the Frostborne, with the masked figure's intent. He realized then that he did not merely wield the crystal, it was wielding him, testing the limits of his will. A sudden gust flung him back against the wall. Pain flared in his shoulder, and the snow blinded him for a heartbeat. When he raised his head, the masked figure had moved. Now it stood at the edge of the battlements, hand extended toward him, the snow bending to its will like a living thing. "Join me," it said, voice silky, hypnotic. "Together, we can remake this world. Together, you will know power beyond your imagining." Rohan swallowed hard, the weight of the crystal against his chest threatening to split him in two. The offer tempted him with whispers of glory and revenge, but beneath the allure, a cold truth gnawed at his soul. This path led only to corruption, to the loss of everything he loved, to the death of the man he once was. "I will never bow to frost or shadow," he said, voice echoing in the wind. "I am the storm, and I will not be tamed." The masked figure laughed, a sound that was both melodic and terrifying. Snow twisted around its feet, forming spikes, blades, a cage of ice that threatened to trap Rohan in a frozen tomb. Rohan felt the crystal flare one last time, hot as fire, cold as death. He braced himself. The next moment would decide not only the fate of Frosthaven, but whether he would survive the night as a man or become something far darker. And then, with a final roar of the storm, the masked figure leapt toward him, claws extended, and the world seemed to pause, hanging between life and oblivion.
Time slowed, as if the storm itself had hesitated to witness what was coming. The masked figure hung in the air for a heartbeat that stretched like an eternity, claws outstretched, eyes hidden yet burning with intent. Rohan braced himself, feeling the crystal's pulse thunder against his ribcage, a savage rhythm that seemed both warning and challenge. Then the figure landed. The impact shattered stone, sending shards and frost scattering across the battlements. Rohan rolled forward instinctively, swinging his sword, the crystal channeling heat and frost in a violent, almost sentient bloom. The masked figure dodged, swift as shadow, and countered with a strike that sent a wave of snow tearing across the parapet. Rohan barely parried, sparks dancing across the blade. "And you are strong," the figure hissed. "But strength alone will not save you from the frost that binds you." Rohan's mind raced. Every attack, every movement was mirrored, anticipated. It was no ordinary opponent. This was a force that read him, a predator tuned to his heart and his weakness. And yet, beneath the fear, fury surged. The memory of his men, of Frosthaven, of lives saved and lives shattered, burned hotter than the storm. and steel met claw again, and the clash rang like a bell tolling doom. Rohan struck again and again, each swing feeding the crystal's power. Dark frost spiraled around his blade, coiling like living serpents. The masked figure recoiled only slightly, then countered, forcing Rohan to step back toward the edge of the battlements. "And you cannot win," the figure said, voice now laced with mockery. "The crystal bends your will. Every heartbeat, every swing feeds me. You fight, wolf, but the wolf is mine." Rohan's eyes blazed. "I am no one's pawn," he shouted. With a surge of raw will, he thrust the blade forward, sending a cascade of ice and fire that tore through the air between them. The masked figure staggered, recoiling as the storm itself seemed to bow to the crystal's fury. Then the world tilted. Frostborne surged from the shadows, twisting from the snow into grotesque forms. Rohan's men fought valiantly, but the creatures multiplied, driven by the masked figure's command. The battlements were a tempest of claws, teeth, and shards of ice. Naelin appeared at his side, dagger drawn, her presence a tether to the man beneath the storm of power. "Rohan, remember yourself," she yelled, her voice slicing through the chaos. Nain-he looked at her, at the fear and courage mingled in her eyes, and something inside him broke free. Not the crystal's hunger, not the frost, not Kalor's influence. Himself. Rohan roared, swinging his blade in a wide arc. The crystal pulsed, but this time he guided it, shaping the frost into barriers that crushed the Frostborne, hurling them into the void below. NNTHE masked figure froze, shock flickering behind the mask. "Impossible," it whispered. "You control it?" Rohan stepped forward, blade raised. "I control myself, and no curse, no crystal, no shadow will take that from me." NNTHE figure lunged, faster than thought, claws aimed for his chest. Rohan sidestepped, slashing with precision, and the crystal flared with a blinding white light. The masked figure screamed, a sound that was at once human and something else, and the frost that had been its cloak shattered, scattering across the wind like shards of glass. An NTHE mask fell. And beneath it, Kalor. His features were twisted, pale, but the spark of the man Rohan had once known burned still. His laughter was gone, replaced by a gurgling howl as the crystal's power surged against him. "Rohan, you!" Kalor gasped, frost searing his lips. "You cannot." And Rohan stared, chest heaving, pulse synced with the crystal. The Frostborne collapsed, snow and ice melting into nothing. The storm began to break, the wind dying to a whisper. The battlements were wrecked, stones cracked, blood and frost mingling in the ruins. Naelin stepped forward, placing a hand on Rohan's shoulder. "It's over," she said softly, though her eyes still searched for danger. Rohan looked at the fallen mage, then at the burning horizon. The crystal's pulse slowed, almost contemplative. He had won, but the victory felt hollow, the taste of power lingering like ash. Somewhere, deep in the night, a faint laugh echoed, smaller, weaker, but not gone entirely. Kalor's eyes flickered toward him. "This isn't over," he croaked, before the frost claimed him completely, leaving nothing but silence and the crackle of the dying storm. Rohan sank to his knees, gripping the crystal. "No," he whispered, voice trembling. "It's never over." An NTHE wind shifted, and in the shadows of Frosthaven, something stirred, waiting. The first light of dawn struggled through the shattered clouds above Frosthaven, casting pale, trembling rays over the battlements. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence heavy enough to crush the spirit of a man, or perhaps to cleanse it. Rohan sat on the cold stones, the crystal resting in his lap like a living thing. Its pulse was slower now, measured, but it still hummed with a quiet threat, as if aware of the weight of choices yet to be made. Around him, the remnants of the battle were stark testimony to the night's horrors. Broken Frostborne lay in twisted forms, ice melting into shallow puddles stained with blood. The walls were cracked, towers leaning like weary giants. The surviving soldiers moved cautiously, some trembling, some shaking off the fog of fear, all staring at Rohan with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Naelin knelt beside him, brushing frost from his shoulder. You survived," she said, voice hoarse but resolute. "And Kalor, he's gone?" Rowan's eyes didn't leave the shattered mask that had fallen at his feet. He's gone, yes. But the crystal, it whispers still. His voice was low, haunted. And I feel something else. Something watching. From the shadows of the ruined courtyard, a figure emerged, cloaked in deep blue, hood drawn low. It was Lord Tyver, one of Frosthaven's oldest and most cautious counselors, his face lined with years of suspicion and wisdom. "Rohan," he said, voice tight with barely controlled anger, "you've brought ruin upon our walls. Men have died under your command, and the city itself." Rohan rose slowly, letting the crystal hang from his chest. "I fought to save them, to save Frosthaven. Kaelor would have destroyed everything, and you know it. Do not pretend otherwise." Tyver's eyes narrowed. "And yet the crystal now pulses in your hand. What assurance do we have that it will not turn on us next? That you will not become what you claim to oppose?" A murmur rippled through the gathered soldiers and council members. Fear and awe intertwined like dark threads around Rohan. He looked at Aelin, her hand gripping his sleeve, steadying him, and found his resolve. "Then I will control it," he said. "I will not let it consume me, and I will not let it consume Frosthaven. But I will need your trust, all of you, or we are already lost." And Tyver's mouth opened as if to reply. But before words could be spoken, a courier arrived, panting, frost clinging to his cloak. He fell to one knee, hands shaking, and extended a folded parchment to Rohan. Rohan unfolded it, eyes scanning the elegant, dangerous script. The words burned across the page. "The Southern Lords march. They claim the storm has weakened Frosthaven. Your enemies see opportunity." Naelin's hand tightened on his arm. "They won't wait," she whispered. "They'll strike before you can recover." Rohan clenched his jaw, glancing at the crystal. It pulsed in agreement, as though it too recognized the brewing storm beyond the walls. "Then we prepare," he said, voice low and commanding. "We fortify, we organize, and we strike first if we must. Frosthaven will not fall, not while I draw breath." Net Tyver's gaze flickered, uncertainty and grudging respect mingling in his eyes. "And Kaelor, the people must know the truth," he said quietly. "They will fear you if they believe you alone held the power to defeat him." Nien Rohan's chest tightened. Fear, respect, loyalty, and suspicion swirled like snow in a blizzard. He looked at the shattered city, the soldiers weary but alive, and knew that the real battle had only just begun. Not with Kaelor, but with those who would see Frosthaven as prey while the city still trembled. And a distant horn sounded from the southern hills, faint but unmistakable. Tyver's hand went to the hilt of his sword, eyes narrowing. "They are coming," he said. Nan Rohan turned toward the horizon, crystal glinting in the fragile morning light. "Then we meet them," he said, jaw set, "and Frosthaven will rise from the ashes stronger than any storm can touch." NNTHE wind carried whispers through the ruins. The frost receded, but the tension remained, coiled like a serpent ready to strike. And somewhere beyond the walls, a shadow moved, patient, waiting. NNTHE, next battle was coming. And this time, no one would survive by mistake. The city of Frosthaven shivered under the early sun, its broken battlements echoing the fear that had settled into the hearts of its people. Rumors spread like wildfire through the streets, carried on the lips of merchants and servants alike. Kaelor's shadow still lingered in whispered tales, and now, with the news of the Southern Lords marching, unease had become a tangible thing, as if the air itself were heavy with tension. Rohan moved through the council chamber, crystal swinging from a chain around his neck. The room smelled of candle wax and ink, of old parchment and stale fear. Tyver, Aelin, and the remaining counselors waited in uneasy silence. Rohan could feel their eyes on him, measuring, questioning, demanding. He had faced monsters in the form of Kaelor, yet these living, breathing doubts felt sharper, more immediate. "The Southern Lords will not hesitate," Rohan said, laying the crystal on the table. "We have no time for hesitation ourselves. We need alliances, reinforcements, and someone to uncover their intentions before their armies reach our walls." Tyver rubbed his chin, eyes shadowed. "There is one who may serve your purpose, but he is dangerous, cunning, and has not shown loyalty to Frosthaven in decades. Rowan's brow furrowed. Who? Lord Malverick of the Ashen Marches. He has spies everywhere, whispers in every court. If anyone knows the Southern Lord's plans, it is he. Tyver's voice was low, almost a confession, but he demands a price, and it is never small. Naelin's hand went to the hilt of her dagger, a subtle gesture of both readiness and warning. What kind of price? She asked sharply. And Tyver's gaze met hers, unflinching. He wants a favor, one that cannot be repaid in coin, one that may bind Frosthaven to him for generations. Rohan's grip on the crystal tightened. His mind spun, calculating, weighing. Trust was a luxury he could not afford, yet knowledge was more dangerous than ignorance. Summon him, Rohan said finally, his voice even. If he refuses, we prepare, as if no help will come. But if he agrees, we must be ready for the consequences. And hours later, the massive doors of Frosthaven creaked open to admit Lord Malverick, a man of slender frame but eyes that glimmered like dark ice. He moved with calculated grace, as though every step was measured to command attention. The courtiers recoiled subtly, sensing the predator beneath the practiced civility. Rohan of Frosthaven, Malverick said, bowing just enough to appear respectful, yet his eyes held something sharper, like knives hidden in velvet. I have heard whispers of your victory, and of your troubles. I see that Kaelor is dead, and yet your walls are in peril. How unfortunate. Rohan did not flinch. You know why I summoned you, he said. Tell me what the Southern Lord's plan. Malverick's smile was slow, deliberate. And what will you give me in return? His voice was smooth, like liquid silk hiding razor edges. Alliances are expensive, and secrets are treasures beyond gold. Nilber bristled, but Rohan raised a hand. Speak, he said. We can negotiate terms after I know what I'm up against. Malverick leaned closer, lowering his voice. They intend to march under the banner of peace. But their peace is a dagger hidden in velvet. Their goal is the heart of Frosthaven. The people will see parades and proclamations, but behind them your walls will be sieged before you even understand who betrayed you. Naelin's fingers twitched near her sword. Then we must strike before they reach us, she said, urgency cutting through her words. Malverick's gaze swept over her, then back to Rohan. Yes, but timing is everything. And the moment you act, you will discover who truly stands with you, and who waits for your fall. NNTHE crystal pulsed suddenly, as though reacting to the tension in the room. A faint hum rose, vibrating in Rohan's chest. He looked at Malverick, then at the counselors, and knew the stakes had just grown higher. From the hall outside came a muffled scream, followed by the echo of heavy boots. The doors banged open, and a servant staggered in, pale as ice, gasping. Rohan Elin, it's the northern gates. Their NNTHE words froze in his throat. Silence fell. Then, with a sudden violent crash, the doors behind him burst open again, and shadowed figures slipped through, moving too fast for the eye to follow. Rohan's hand went instinctively to the crystal. The pulse quickened. He looked at Aelin, whose eyes were wide with alarm and determination. The first betrayal, he muttered under his breath. NNTHE chamber erupted into chaos. Chaos swallowed the council chamber like a sudden storm. Shadowed figures moved with unnerving precision, striking with blades that caught the candlelight in jagged flashes. Aelin's dagger sang through the air, deflecting a blow aimed at Tyver, whose chainmail rang like a bell. Rohan's hand clutched the crystal, its pulse now a frantic heartbeat, as though warning him of the calamity yet to come. NNTHE intruders were swift, their movements choreographed. Each step was calculated, each strike meant to sow fear rather than kill outright. "Protect the crystal!" Rohan shouted, though his voice barely carried over the clamor. Aelin moved beside him, her blade carving arcs of silver fire through the dim light, every swing precise, deadly. One attacker lunged at Rohan, dagger aimed for his chest, but Malverick's long, slender fingers intercepted, twisting the arm back with uncanny strength. "Control yourself, boy," Malverick said, his voice deceptively calm. "Panic is a luxury you cannot afford." Rohan swallowed, forcing himself to breathe, to focus. His mind raced, tracing every option, every possible escape, every ally in the room. And then he saw it. The traitor. One of the counselors, cloaked in shadows, slipping toward the crystal with a careful, deliberate stride, a traitor. Rohan bellowed, his voice cutting through the chaos, and Tyver's eyes widened in horror as he recognized the figure. Ser Ulrich, a man of long service, sworn to Frosthaven, now betraying it with subtle grace. Ulrich's dagger glinted, poised to pierce the crystal's protective aura. "Not if I have anything to say about it," Aelin shouted, sprinting toward Ulrich. Her blade met his with a resonant clang, sparks flying, their clash ringing like a bell of impending doom. Ulrich's smirk was thin, confident, but Aelin's resolve was fiercer. Every strike she delivered was not just for the crystal, but for the survival of Frosthaven itself. Neroan's gaze flicked to Malvarich, who now stood near the chamber's threshold, eyes narrowed. He was watching, calculating, as if the unfolding chaos were a game only he understood. "Do you intend to stand idle?" Rohan yelled. Malvarich's lips curved into a faint smile. "I intend to survive and ensure you do too, if you are clever enough." With a sudden, forceful motion, Ulrich disarmed Aelin, sending her dagger skittering across the floor. The crystal shimmered violently, almost as if it sensed the danger. Rohan lunged forward, placing his hands over the glowing stone. Energy surged, blinding in its brilliance, and a shockwave through the intruder's back, and a scream pierced the chamber. The shock revealed the shadowed figures. True forms. Mercenaries. Some marked with the sigil of the Southern Lords, others cloaked in Frosthaven livery. The revelation struck like ice water. The enemy had been inside all along. And as the dust settled, Ulrich staggered to his knees, eyes wide in shock and pain. "Impossible the crystal," Rohan's voice was cold, sharp. "No one touches Frosthaven's heart without consequence." Malvarich stepped forward, his hand resting lightly on Rohan's shoulder. "This is only the beginning. The Southern Lords advance, and their spies have already sown doubt in every hall. You will need more than courage to survive what comes next." From the windows, a strange, distant rumble shook the city. Smoke curled on the horizon, and the northern gates, unguarded, exposed, were aflame. The first sign that the Southern Lords had begun their march, and Frosthaven's defenses had already begun to crumble. And Rohan turned, eyes blazing with determination and fury. "We fight. Every wall, every street, every shadow of this city must be defended. Nothing else will do." Aelin retrieved her dagger, her face streaked with soot and resolve. Tyver straightened, grim determination replacing fear. And Malvarich, still watching, gave a nod as if approving a move in a complex game only he could foresee. And outside, the city trembled. Inside, the council chamber lay in ruin. The crystal glowing faintly, defiant NNTHE battle for Frosthaven had only just begun. And in the darkness, Rohan realized one terrifying truth. The greatest enemy might not be the Southern Lords at the gates, but the traitors hiding within their own walls.